Reflections Over a Great Distance by Lisa J. Wolfe, from a collection titled Planting Seeds and Other Stories. This story is dedicated to Robert B1, as I believe that it was written with him in mind years before we met. Reflections Over a Great Distance. Mars hung above him, a crimson enigma luring Allen's telescope into contact. Maximizing the magnification made Mars large as a tabby cat. The orb winked and danced in the darkness like Alice's mocking cat. Allen stared until his vision lost context, until he became visually welded to the red planet. A point for pure meditation, Mars drew him beyond the solitude of the fire watch. All day Allen watched the trees, looked out across the green horizon for smoke wisps or spits of flame that hissed to life after lightning cracked open the empty sky. The telescope took him beyond those natural particulars to more distant, open-ended observation, as the crickets beneath the cabin's window sang into the space of the summer night, calling their kind to join the chorus. The shrill ring of the telephone jarred Allen's concentration. His back tensed like a rabbit ready to jump. In the pure silence, the sound seemed magnified and alien. Allen walked across the room, bare feet thumping on the old wooden floorboards. "Hello," he said. "Charlie! Is Charlie there?" a woman's voice cried. "There's no Charlie here, ma'am. I'm sorry. You must have the wrong number. This is the Forest Watch Observatory." "But," she sounded weepy and miffed, "he gave me this number. Said to call any time. He said." "I'm sorry," Allen coughed. "Of all the nerve," the voice accused. "You tell him when he comes in from wherever the hell he is, I've had enough of his lies. He wants to carry on like that anymore. He can forget about Lucy. I'm better than all that, I can tell you. And you can tell him he can keep his support. It's dirty money from a filthy man, and I can do without it. We both can." She sobbed heavily into the phone. Allen's hand shook. "Ma'am, there's no Charlie here." Allen looked around the room for something that would confirm his statement. The gray steel file cabinet, the old wooden desk, and the bookcase lined with manuals, charts, and maps sat mute, offering no assistance. "Liar!" she screamed. "Just tell him!" She hung up. The line whined at him. He replaced the receiver and stared at the old black phone. At least 1:30 in the morning, and he didn't know any Charlie. What could he do? He stared at his fingers. There was nothing he could do. Maybe he could turn off the phone in case she called again by accident. Maybe Charlie had given her that number, but it wasn't within policy to turn the phone off. Allen had to be ready any time of day or night for emergencies affecting the forest within an 80-mile radius. He had to maintain his responsibility, guard his post, but now he was unnerved. The small room seemed suddenly flimsy, an egg swaying on stilts far above the forest floor. Just a shack, really. Hardly more than a few hours' work to assemble. Not much in it, either. Allen padded over to his cot and pulled back the burgundy wool blanket. He climbed into bed, raised the covers to his chin, and pulled the light cord. Cool, soothing moonglow filled the room. Looking out the window, Allen watched Mars flicker and laugh high above. Though no one generally came up during his watch, Allen made the bed and straightened up every morning regardless, a remnant of his military days. He didn't mind the habit. Actually, he preferred regimentation and order, liked knowing each day resembled the one before. He knew that was why he was so good at his job. Appreciative of and in tune with the familiar, the extraordinary leaped out and set off alarms in his head. He descended the ladder from the fire watch cabin in the early morning stillness. A light rain fell with no chance of lightning. Alan enjoyed watching the trees grow, could see them grow almost, feel them drinking from deep within the ground. They were a family to him, thousands of silent, patient brothers and sisters, growing infinitesimally taller and wider each day. Proud of their progress, he enjoyed their stationary achievement. They never spoke above a whisper either. He liked that. He could hear his own thoughts. The phone rang that night while Alan read a history of the rainforests of South America. With trepidation, he answered. The voice sounded distant, the way transatlantic calls used to carry the sound of the ocean cables, muffled and compressed. She was subdued and apologetic. I am sorry. She sounded like a small child, frightened by the rage of her own tantrum. He imagined her as 7 or 8 years old, in women's clothes that hung too large on a small child's frame. I wrote the number down wrong. I'm not too late again, am I? I'm real sorry about last night. Relief washed over him. He felt forgiven a major transgression, like a child who believes he must have sinned, for why else the severe scolding? The weight of Charlie's loan of guilt fell from his shoulders, and he breathed deeply. I know you don't know Charlie or me, mister. I feel like a silly fool. I had to call to apologize. I feel so bad. Sorry to bother you again. No, it's fine. It's only 8 o'clock. Sun's hardly even set. She laughed lightly. The evening chill was coming on, and he buttoned his gray cardigan, twiddled the button on the bottom with his thumb and forefinger. I would have called sooner once I realized, but I was too embarrassed. You probably thought I was a crazy jackass. I am really sorry. He let it go. A gray mist hung over the pines, like the trees' dreams condensed above their spreading limbs. Are you okay? He asked. Oh, sure, she laughed. I'm okay. Guess I'm always okay. It really isn't time not to be, is there? He heard the edge beneath her words, the glint of angry exhaustion. Looking out at the trees, he watched mist slowly move across their steadfast forms. I'm glad you're all right, Alan said. You know how it is. The rent's late, the food stamps don't stretch far enough, the winter's coming on, and the kids never in the same size for more than a day or so, it seems. Her laughter was brittle. Sounds like you need a break. Alan wished he could say something truly helpful. Yeah, vacation to Tahiti. Oh, well, I'm sorry. Listen to me going on to you. I've caused you trouble enough, bothered you, your missus, and kids in the middle of the night. You all have a nice night, and tell them I'm real sorry, really I am. Friends call me Loony Lucy when I get like that. Can't help it. Stress knocks me between the eyes like a hunk of concrete. Bam, and I freak. He heard her strike a match and inhaled deeply to light a cigarette. There's no wife, ma'am, just me and my trees. Trees? She exhaled heavily. He imagined her form shrouded in gray carcinogens. I work for the Forest Service. I watch the trees. You guard trees? She snorted. Make sure they don't escape? Don't want them to all run off, do you? No, he smiled. I make sure they don't catch fire. Make sure we get the fires out in time if lightning strikes or a man-made fire gets out of control. That's nice, Lucy said. Pay good? Pretty good. Darkness slowly crept over the forest, changing the trees from green to olive to black, painting silhouettes across the horizon. Well, Charlie never held a job more than 3 months. That's why I can't get nothing from him. No good louse. He wanted to put the phone down and return to his watch, but she seemed glued to the connection. You're a nice man, you know. I don't even know your name. Alan, he told her. Alan Warner, feeling her try to scale the distance. Well, Alan, maybe sometime little Chucky and I'll be walking through the woods and we'll see you. Get to thank you for being so decent. It's a rare thing, you know. Oh, don't think twice about it, ma'am. Lucy, she urged. Lucy, he repeated. You ever get lonely out there, she asked. He watched Mars rising in the night sky. Oh, now and then. It's pretty quiet out here. Sounds really boring, she said. I'd go nuts in all that quiet, no street noise. You got a TV? No, he admitted. Poor thing. Next time you're in town, give me a call. You can come on over and watch mine. We got great color and cable with the movie channel. 555-9693. Lucy Quinney. Easy to remember, not many Q's in that little phone book. Right. Night enveloped the trees. He hadn't turned the lights on in the cabin, so he stood in cool darkness. You take care, Miss Quinney. Thanks, Alan. You got that number now. 555-9693 for a good home-cooked meal. Listen to me, I sound like a kid, so forward. I don't know what gets into me. I'm just feeling better, I guess. Good night, Miss Quinney, Alan said. Lucy, she reminded him. Thanks for listening, Alan. Oh, sure, I know how it can be. I'll get over it, though. I mean, I don't care about the guy. For all I care, he can drop off the edge of the earth. Guess I should be used to his shenanigans. He's so predictable. Acts like the sweetest thing you've ever met, till you shake him to get a dime out for the kid, and all you hear is his head rattle. Can't believe I let him get me that upset. My mama used to say, Lucy, for a smart girl, you sure were dumb to marry Charlie. I'm just going to forget about him once and for all. You know, wipe the creep out of my mind. What's that line? Wash that louse right out of my hair. Good riddance to bad rubbish. You get the idea. God, here I go, rattling on again. Good night, Lucy. A spider crawled across the bottom of a chair to Alan's gray wool socks drying by the heater. Suddenly, the squalling sound of a tempestuous child filled the receiver. Chucky, not now. Excuse me a second, Al. Ma! The sound shrilled like an alarm gone amok. Alan imagined huge tears welling in a boy's eyes. He felt a stabbing sadness in that moment, as he briefly imagined himself in the little house with Lucy and Chuck, the TV blaring the evening's entertainment, minds filling but never growing. He wondered in that instant why trees continue to grow, and within all the noise, furniture, and fresh laundered clothes, some people's relationships don't. And as briefly as he'd imagined himself in the house with Lucy and Chuck, he remembered with a jolt the house he and she had divided. Alan saying again and again, it doesn't matter, take it, they're just things. He remembered how his heart felt at that moment like a piece of sod, the roots rent in two. He'd given her the portion most intact, kept the remnant to reseed, taken his gardening and travel books, maps of the world, and the construction toys Matthew had outgrown and no longer cared for, and left. Lucy talked to Chuck, shushed him curtly, then transitioned to a soothing, cooing tone. He felt for her, remembered how hard raising kids can be, remembered. The moon rose above the woods, tangling in the black branches of a tall, deciduous tree. I've got to go, Lucy told him. This kid's out of control. Alan heard the shrill siren and insistent banging of what sounded like pots and pans. He imagined a floor covered with the contents of drawers and cabinets, strewn in a mad attempt to gain recognition. You have a good evening, Lucy, Alan said. Get some rest. He hung up the old black receiver. Feeling a sudden chill, he filled his teacup and sat in the desk chair. Clad in sweater, boxer shorts, and slippers, he stared across the room into the shadows, the green fluorescence of the clock, his only guide to the excessively familiar contents of the cabin. Part 2. He'd rented a room in town for when he was off duty. A furnished room with a well-used bureau, complete with floral contact paper in the drawers and an oval mirror losing its reflectivity. Devoid of personality, the room lacked highs or lows, a room of no extremes. Usually, Alan went to the library when not working. He'd meditate for hours in the periodicals room, leaf through journals on subjects ranging from agriculture to chemistry, quantum physics to zoology. The more technical, the better. But he couldn't bring himself to go this morning. He barely managed to pack his small red suitcase and get organized for the drive back to civilization. The past 2 days found him in a fog he couldn't make his way through, couldn't make sense of. Even his vision seemed blurred, the furniture out of focus, the trees themselves unreal. He wanted to call someone, but he no longer had any personal phone numbers. Walking off into the sunset had seemed the thing to do. He thought he'd swept up all the hurt, all the unmanageable little pieces of emotion and unwieldy memories collected in years of marriage and dumped them in the trash, buried them, burned them, decided they weren't important once he found out he wasn't. To Susan. He got to the point where he couldn't visualize her face anymore. It had been an effort, but he thought the forgetting well mastered. Alan had always been self-contained. Susan scolded him from sunrise to sunset about how antisocial he was, about how he disliked parties, dancing, and politics. She met his replacement at a party, a banker who never closed his mouth, played ragtime piano, and loved yachting parties. Alan simply did the quiet, decent thing. He was tired of accounting anyway, of row upon row of numbers, ties with diagonal stripes and pressed blue linen pants and crisp blazers. His hands were always too soft. They cried for dirt under the nails, for calluses, for contact. He preferred the orderliness of trees, how they gave each other space and gladly hosted other organisms. He learned a great deal from their company. But tree limbs could not reach out to embrace, could not put a hand on his back where the aching pain gathered, could not say, "I understand." For so long he practiced looking at distant objects to understand things on their own terms, see a rock, and actually see the specific rock in front of his eyes without the minutiae of memory interfering. But that high-pitched wail, Lucy's desperate tone, had once again ripped his fist-sized muscle apart. So he'd sat in his rented room that first day, drinking tea in a rocking chair by a window that looked out over the main street. Afternoon shoppers came and went. His hands shook like an old man's, and his legs felt feverish. Fragments of remembrance torched his inner landscape until only a smoldering field with no space left on which to stand remained. Alan finally dressed and went out into the cool evening to a deserted street, to the quietude of a small town after hours. He had no destination, no appointment. He stopped at a phone booth, felt that old desperate desire to call his ex-wife, but feared he would answer, the cavalier banker. Fingers trembling, he flipped through the delicate pages of the local white pages. There it was, El Quinney. He noted the street address and began walking. 1/2 mile at most, he estimated. He could use the exercise, he told himself. Alan listened to the soft thud of his shoes upon the street.